Episode number 96 of People I Know show. Curt Carstensen, joined today online by a former college classmate. I think we graduated from St. Cloud State University. I think it was the same semester. We might have been off by one. Julie Rose joins me from somewhere in her nomadic life. Where are you today, Julie?
I'm in Boston. Hey, Curt.
Nice to see you. Boston, that's a place that I've been meaning to get back to. We'll get into what you're up to, but why did you choose Boston to be at right now?
Um, I don't know. I rolled the dice, much like most decisions I make, and just thought, hey, good weather, lots to do. Let's check it out again.
You're doing something that I've envisioned in different ways for a few years. I was recently in Mexico, and I met some people that were doing a version of what you're doing there, where I met this couple from Portland that has a business in Portland, but it's been online, or at least their portion of their work. They're spending 3 months finding a place to maybe become more permanent in Mexico. And I met someone else that works for a United States company, but it's been moving around every 2 or 3 weeks to different parts of Mexico. And I normally go on a vacation for like a week. And I'm like, I want to stay places longer. I just mentioned I haven't been to Boston in a long time and I want to go back. You're there for how long do you think you'll be in Boston?
I'll be in Boston for a week, and then I go to Portland, Maine for 2 weeks, and then I go to Bar Harbor, Maine for 1 week. And then I don't know. I will see where the nomad life brings me.
So that's the gist of what I want to talk to you about mostly. But as I mentioned, St. Cloud State, I graduated in the spring of 2006, I think. Where were you? And what's kind of gone on since then, the last 15 years?
I graduated in 2007.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And basically, I guess my career took me from news, broadcast news, spent about 6 years in a few newsrooms, and then I transitioned into corporate life so I could finally have holidays off and a normal working schedule. And basically, I don't know, in the past 5 to 7 years, really like started focusing on social media. And so that is my expertise today. And as you know, social media is all done online. So it really works out for my nomadic lifestyle.
And I'd imagine with the mass communications degree, is that what your degree was as well? I just remember us being on set of UTVS News maybe one day a week for a semester, or maybe we were in some classes together. I know we weren't like that close, but I do remember being around you quite a bit, and I'm sure we've had a few conversations. It's just been so long, I'm kind of forgetting what I used to know.
Yes, mass comm, which, back in the day when you learned how to, produce live video and live stream and edit and all of these things that we thought, oh, this is very, very niche and very specific to this, broadcasting industry. Well, look at us now. And now we have all these skills that have taken us into other careers and other roles at other organizations. So I very, very much appreciate all that training.
Yeah, I hadn't done any media related stuff for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And then I realized, I have these skills I used to have doing a lot of sports broadcasting. And that led me into thinking starting a podcast is probably my best first step to creating something and seeing where that takes me. So you into social media after the TV career and the getting out of the TV career to have some weekends off. What point did you realize that living life the way you'd been living it maybe wasn't what you wanted, and what kind of sparked the interest to start this nomadic lifestyle that we're here to talk about?
Well, first, I will say nothing happens overnight. It wasn't just like I woke up one day and I went from 0 to 60. And I think that is a misconception that a lot of people have, that they're living one way and then they have to totally like upend it and uproot it and turn it upside down. And that's not really the case. I think you can explore, you can experiment, you can, dip your toes into a nomadic lifestyle without going full force like I did. And that's what I did. I have been kind of living this way before I officially lived this way. So I guess I'll explain what living this way before I live this way means. How I'm living now. about a year ago, just under a year, I sold my house in Phoenix. That's where I lived for 11 years. Sold my house in Phoenix, basically in like a violent revolt against a commercialism and materialism. I basically like opened all the doors and just said, come and get it. Everything's for sale. I'm getting rid of everything. I'm only keeping the things that can fit in my car. And for a 3 bedroom, 2 bath house and 2 car garage, that was a lot of things. It was a lot of work, but I really just wanted to be free. I wanted to be free, I think, of the weight of all of those things. And so now, since then, since I offloaded everything, I've been basically traveling the US by car, staying at various Airbnbs and hotels and on friends' couches, and moving, every 1 to 5 weeks, basically, spending time in a city, trying to get to know it as much as I can, seeing all its top sites, meeting people, and then moving on to the next place. So it's been almost 12 months of that. And to go back to the previous question, making that decision, it was really happened sort of over time. I would rent out my house. I did some house hacking. So I would rent out my house for certain time periods where in Arizona, it was a very high prime season.
Oh,
So
very
then I
nice.
would, yeah, then I would go elsewhere. So I'd rent out my house for top dollar. And then I would downsize into this tiny little casita for 4 months. And I realized kind of moving from the 1,600 square foot home to the 400 square foot home, hey, I can live out of this for 4 months. I can do anything temporarily. This is no big deal. And I'm really enjoying myself. And by the way, I'm socking away some money. So I did that. I did that one year for 4 months. I did it another year for 3 weeks. I did it another year for a month. And kind of those little tests, those experiments helped kind of build up my comfort level with embracing this full time. And another thing that I sort of learned that tipped me over the edge, why I wasn't going to just keep doing what I was doing, is I didn't want to pay for two places at once. Because if I was going to pay for my house, whether it was rented or not, and you can't guarantee a rental, I was also paying for wherever I was staying. And, trying to be very budget conscious in the end, not very sustainable.
That's one of the things I think about because the way that I afford my life, one of the big ways is I've been living with very affordable rent for a long time, living with family, living with friends. And my situation, it's been somewhere between like $400 and $550 a month in rent that I've been paying for a long time.
How
And
affordable is that?
and so I just imagine if I was someone that really valued having a nice place to myself, which I used to own a house that was like a $1,300 mortgage or something, just
Hmm.
all these hundreds of dollars that I don't spend on where I live, I then put towards mostly travel and investing. And that really
Yeah.
goes a long way over the course of a year and affords me a lot of trips. So when I do go on a vacation for a week or two, and I'm not like no one's spending any time in my room taking care of my rent, although it's pretty affordable. That is one thing I
Hmm.
think about is I'm now spending way more each night to live in this place for a week or two than I would at home, and that part of it kind of bothers me. So it seems like you've solved for that, and I guess I'm kind of surprised that you didn't keep your house and rent it out like just for a full year's rental. What really weighed into your mind on deciding that I'm just going to be done with this, even though it maybe could have been more lucrative the other way? How
Yes.
did you come
Well,
to the conclusion?
I definitely considered that. And first, I'll just say, a year ago now, we had no idea how long this pandemic was going to last. We had no idea when the eviction moratoriums were going to expire. We had no idea if housing markets were going to all of a sudden tank or keep going. So I kind of wanted to err on the side of caution in that regard. I got all this equity in my house. I don't know if this is going to continue, so I want to capture that. So that was one thing I considered. The second thing I consider is, and I'm going to get very, financially technical here. I considered if I turn it into a rental, then after when I do eventually sell it, then I have to claim like capital gains on that because it's not my primary residence anymore.
Okay.
So I was kind of being cognizant of that and having to take a big tax, um, having to address that in the coming years whenever I would eventually sell that. Didn't want to deal with that situation. And then also, those time periods that I told you that I rented my house out and stayed elsewhere, I still had to be a landlord.
Yeah.
So I was still getting called, oh, this isn't working, and oh, I'm so helpless. And I mean, some were valid, sure, but others not so much. And I really didn't want to deal with that. I also didn't really want to hire a property manager. I just didn't want to have that on the books. I didn't want to have to still deal. I mean, and there's a few options. Could have rented out empty, and then I would have had to do a property manager. I still would have had to get all my shit out of the house.
Yeah.
So that still would have been a lot of work and a lot of effort. Or I could have rented it out furnished, but then I need, somebody who's going to be flipping it and taking care of it. And then I'm still getting called, and then I'm still paying for cable and electricity and internet and all of those things. And I just thought, I want this burden off me. No matter what, if it could have made me some more money, because I really valued just the freedom and the like leaving responsibility behind. And that's really kind of the driver of this decision.
So that level of peace of mind is worth a number of dollars per month. I don't know if you've like come up with how much it's worth, but apparently it's worth enough to not deal with it. And I think I'm in the same boat as you. I'm moving soon, and I was considering, well, maybe I should buy a place, get my own roommate, and use it as a longer term investment. And just as I go through the process, it's like, this sounds awful. I don't want to deal with this. Yes, financially, it could actually be a very good thing in the long run, but also not having things to worry about is one of the successes in my life to live a pretty good stress free life. And why do I
Yeah.
want to jeopardize that to maybe gain a little bit of money in the long run? Money that I don't necessarily need, even, but it would just be another way to invest. So I'd rather invest my money elsewhere, not think about it so much, and not have anyone breaking my thing
Hmm.
and having to deal with it. So I do like that.
Yeah.
I like that approach. Obviously, there's people doing it the other way and doing really well, but they do
Right.
need to have it on their mind at least some of the time.
I think there's 2 points that I'll make, in reaction to that. One, it is not just dollars and cents. It is an emotional decision, and we have to take our emotional well-being into account when we make decisions, because otherwise we're going to regret them or we're gonna feel lost or whatever, and we really need to consider that. It's not just about, like, the bottom line. Okay, so my second point is, yes, the housing market did kind of take off in the last year. But also, the stock market has done very well. So even though I could have left my house, I could have kept my house, held on to it, sold it later, realized even more value in the house due to the accelerated housing market. I put my earnings in the stock market, which has had very, very high returns over the last year. So maybe it's a wash. I'm not sure. Haven't done the exact math, but I feel confident that I made a good decision at the time, knowing the information that I had at the time. I made the best decision, knowing what I knew, and I've been smart with that money in the meantime. So that's what that's what I ascribe to. Others can make their own decisions.
Just sounds like there's a lot of good ways to make your money work for you, and you've captured at least two possibilities, and this one I think fits your lifestyle better.
Yeah, and everyone has to just make the decision that's right for them. Um, Understanding, yes, there is financial considerations to look at, and also emotional considerations. Like, what do you feel? What do you feel in your gut? And I think with that balance, you can't really go wrong.
Well, let's get into the other financial topics that might be relevant, and then I have a bunch of other things I want to ask you about. Okay, so you decide on the numbers game, it's worth it to you to pay what it's going to cost to live at these different places, and I'm imagining that you're not always staying at the fanciest, most amazing palatial estate, and sometimes you are. So when you look at a month or a week, how do you figure out how much you're going to put into where you sleep, knowing that if you're going to a city, if you're like me, and I imagine you are in this way, you're there to see the city as much as possible and not necessarily be in any one space to hang out.
Yeah. So basically what I did, like anything, I'm going to look at it rationally, I'm going to look at it emotionally. Like, what does my gut tell me? So I basically looked at, this is how much my house cost. This is all the other things that it cost me per month to keep it alive. And what would my budget be for accommodations elsewhere, give or take, and it ended up being, I think my monthly expenses in Arizona were probably around, mortgage plus all the other housing related bills, maybe like 1,800 a month or something. And so I thought, well, my housing budget is going to be 2,000 per month as I travel across the US, because that's the most I'm going to pay. That's the cap. Nothing's going to break. I'm going to be fine with that 2,000. And there have definitely been places that, hey, it was 1,500 for a month. Hey, it was 1,600 for a month. And then other places that it was 2,500 for a month. And it depends on where you choose to stay. So if you want to pick a high cost of living area to spend your time in, then typically I will balance that with a low cost of living area on the flip side. And with that kind of rotating mindset, I will keep, my average budget under control, and understanding that, okay, if I need to, give or take in other budgets, maybe I'm going to try to do more grocery shopping. Maybe I'm going to, not do any kind of extraneous shopping, which I don't do a lot anyway. But you just think about how you're going to trim so that you can stay within a reasonable budget, and then know you're going to catch up later.
And it sounds like you're pulling it off. I want to get into your blog or website here in just a moment, but one of the things that I read there indicated that over however many months you had spent nearly precisely the same amount living at home as you did living in all sorts of places.
Yeah. Yeah, that, and I was a little bit scared about giving people real numbers, because people are kind of scared to talk about like finances in actual dollar amounts. But I said, hey, what the hell? I'll give my readers some real tangible information. And I looked at 6 months in 2020. I picked 6 months that were, I didn't have any like big expenses that would throw off averages. And I looked at this 6 months, and then I looked at the next 6 months in the following year over year, and basically almost flat, and maybe it was a touch above 25,700 traditional life over 6 months, and 25,300 nomad life over 6 months, which ends up being like, I don't know, somewhere around 4,000 a month. And that really shocked me. I was like, oh, I'm so nervous. How bad is it going to be? And that really shocked me. And granted, it's all about choices. It's all about, where do you choose to spend your money? Do you choose to spend it on experiences or on things? And back then I was probably, maybe I should upgrade my, get a new piece of furniture for the bedroom, or maybe I should do this, or I need, new couple new pairs of shoes. And I'm not making purchases like that anymore. I do not have room. I do not have room for all those things. And by the way, when I do buy something else, it's because this shirt is falling apart, or these shoes are like way too dirty to be used again. And I make choices like that. So I think it's all within our grasp um, if we decide what's important to us and pursue those priorities.
I know in my life, structure and constraints serve me very well. And I imagine the structure of a vehicle size and what you can hold in there and what you want to move in and out of it on a weekly or monthly basis really is a great motivator to not accumulate things. Whereas a house of 3 or 4 bedrooms or whatever size and a couple big living rooms just means, oh, there's that space in that one room that doesn't have anything. Let me spend all this money on this thing I do not need, which in this country, I know that's just what a lot of people do because
Yeah.
I don't know what else you can do. You buy this house and you have all this space. You don't want to sit it empty because that's kind of
Yeah.
maybe, especially if what other people think about your space means a lot to you. You want to impress the people that come over. Well, I don't know exactly what you've got going on, but you probably don't have a lot of visitors in your day to day life, so you don't have to even concern yourself with that at all. And these are things that people that are buying houses these days are going to do, and that's perfectly okay if that's the lifestyle. And I'm sure there's some people that have that lifestyle and a version of the lifestyle you're living, or what I've been doing, always on the move. But I also know that there's a lot of people that become house poor, I think is what they call it, when
Hmm.
so much of your money is going into your house every month that you really can't afford to do all that much more than live in it and appreciate the fact that you have the house. So
Yeah.
we're very much in line with her thinking here, Julie.
Yeah, it's the American curse, bigger, better, more expensive, more status, more brand names, all of that, that it's chasing, chasing, chasing. And you mentioned you give lots of people grace. If that's what you're after, that's great. But I think the caveat is just don't expect that to make you happy. And
Hmm.
people have this like misguided expectation, like once I have this, I will be happy. I will have made it. I will um, they'll have everything I ever wanted and life is a breeze. And that's not the reality. So if we think about what is it that's going to really make us happy and be honest with ourselves, first of all, ask yourself the question, be honest with the answer about the answer, and then two, actually take steps to chase that and to pursue what the answer is, what happiness will, how you plan to create your happiness. You're much better off than just kind of following blindly this whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality.
And I do think that is the trap. Is I don't know that everyone is super introspective in all sorts of ways, and especially this way. If you just do what most people do, you will have a bigger and better home every time you get a pay raise, and that's what you'll be doing. And I guess I had my own house some years ago. I wasn't emotionally attached to it. And in fact, I think which served me, I suppose, in the long run, I took a financial hit on it. I bought and sold at the wrong times, which turned me off from that, the idea of having a house at that time. I think in retrospect, had I not been so negative about it, I would have bought a house again and probably the value would have gone up tremendously and could have captured something the way that you have. But I didn't. But in the meantime, I've done all kinds of traveling and realizing, okay, at some point, I've got to find a way to incorporate more time and all these amazing places I haven't been to or have previously enjoyed, and less time hanging out doing the same things I do most days when I'm home. So seeing you in your nomadic life is quite an inspiration. And I think the reason I even know about this is your website that you post to somewhat frequently, and seeing you on Facebook. Like we mentioned, we haven't spoken probably in a very long time, but through early day social media, I've been aware of your comings and goings a little bit and seen you doing some traveling. And it was your most recent post, I think, that struck me. Like I forgot that I'd seen that you're doing this, and then your month 11 of a nomad life post really like, wow, this is happening. She's been doing this a year. I've been thinking about this. So tell me about this website, what or the blog, depending on how you describe it, how it began, and is it still serving the same purpose now as maybe your lifestyle has changed a bit?
Yes, so the website is juliedevive.com, JULIEDEVIVRE.com, for those of you who don't speak French.
Me.
So it is a play on words, obviously, Julie, because the term is joie de vivre, and that means the joy of living, the exuberance of living. And basically, the way that I take it is that you're living your life to the fullest. You're living in the moment. You are trying to experience all that you can. And you're not, complacent or lazy or whatever. And I really kind of that term resonated with me, and I thought this is cool and nobody has that domain yet. So I started the website 4 years ago when I
Okay.
went to well, almost 4 years ago when I went to Europe for a month. And kind of the backstory to that is I had lost my job. I felt like I lost a piece of myself. My identity kind of took a hit because I had really baked a lot into that job. I had my identity felt really embedded in that role, and I loved it and I was really good at it, but it was very, very stressful and very time consuming. And um, it was sort of kind of a little bit debilitating to my well-being. And so once I kind of made amends, I guess, with the fact that that happened, and I started to really, oh my gosh, I get my life back. I was thinking, how am I going to use these months before I find a new job? I'm not jumping back into the workforce. I want to now, like, take this as an extended vacation and really enjoy it. I went to Europe. I lived out a very small backpack for a month, and that kind of really kicked me off into, oh, I can be a minimalist and I don't need all those things and I can get by just fine and I can be very, very happy. And that sort of that experience was one of the dipping in the toes into all the other dipping in the toes that I had sort of leading up to where I am now. And so the website's really kind of evolved in there was a lot of international travel at first because I was doing a lot of that international travel, like tips and tricks and practical things, and then emotional things as well. And now it's just sort of evolved into the nomad life and all the things around it with travel and budgeting and love and dating and traveling with the dog and so on. So check it out, and I'd love to hear from you guys on what you think.
About 4 years into it, I've had this podcast for about 3 years, and I know one thing I don't do well, and maybe your services are needed for me, or someone that's better and more focused on social media. Is I don't market this thing very well. It's grown, and there's been some episodes that have really gotten a big response. But in general, I think it's a lot of work for someone that doesn't have a big name or isn't already famous to emerge through so many blogs, so many podcasts, so many Instagram feeds, and gain a lot of popularity. So, what have you learned in that regard by having the website and the blog? To what does it take, if you've learned this at all, to really make progress? Because I know it's not that easy.
Well, I don't think that I've mastered it at all. But I think what's important to me is that, my audience has an emotional connection to me and what I have to say resonate and that they're highly engaged. I care more about having a highly engaged audience than a massive audience because then they're less connected to me. They feel like they can't reach out. I get a lot of DMs. I get a lot of messages from people. Hey, I want to learn how to do what you're doing. And I do Instagram lives where I answer questions and I talk about things that I've experienced on this. And that's for people who, are either just kind of curious, just, oh, I'm just really enthralled by this whole idea. I don't think it would ever work for me. Or they're really just like, I want guidance on how to make this happen. And people that I don't know, which I think is cool. I don't know how they found me, but they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm not here to make money. I'm not making any money on the content that I put out there. Not yet anyway. But
Yeah,
it's
one
really
day.
just yeah, I really just want to inspire and motivate people. And kind of how I get paid, so to speak, is when people reach out and they say, you really moved me to do A, B, or C, and I wouldn't have really considered it without your guidance, or even just by observing what you're doing and inspiring some confidence in me to do the same.
And I think my approach is similar. And certainly sometimes people reach out with ways that me or my guest has made an impact on them. But this is an example talking to you. Like, I haven't done this yet. I've been thinking, how do I do something of the sort? And I imagine there's going to be people that watch or listen to our conversation that hadn't quite had the thought yet, that would be very interested in this. And that's exciting because as the world is shifting to more work from home or work from wherever you're at type of jobs, I do think a lot more people are going to do their version of what you're doing. And I guess if you're going to do it, probably start as soon as you're able to and just get out there and do it. Because I'd imagine also at some point it's going to be more challenging to get accommodations. If a lot of people are really doing that, it might actually be more challenging to do some of the things that you're doing as an early adopter to this lifestyle that you're living. Do
Yeah,
you see people out there doing the same thing?
I no. I've met I've not randomly met anybody. I have met people online that we've connected somehow through my content, and then we've met later in real life.
Okay.
but I have not met anybody like randomly like, "Oh, this is what you're doing. It's the same as me." I think there are some people that maybe are reached out to me because I used to do this, or I'm thinking about doing this, or I like dabbled in it. But no one who is actually doing full time, left my house, left behind everything I own. So I don't know if that makes me kind of crazy or what. I don't know.
You're just ahead of the curve. I think it's happening. It's going to happen more and more because so many people, and because of the pandemic, have been working from home and just staying home, and that makes a lot of sense. But I would have been like you. I think if I had a job that allowed that to once you feel like you can do it more safely, not from home, go somewhere else and do the same thing because why not? Like this, especially if you like traveling, there's only so much time to get to all these places. So if you can double up on work and vacation, that just seems like the best way to do it
Yeah,
until we all have an early retirement and just can be on vacation for all the time that we want.
right.
So you mentioned not meeting anyone randomly that does this, but in your blog, you do occasionally post about what it's like dating either in this lifestyle and before you had this lifestyle for these last 11 months and counting. Also, there's some other posts about dating. So I am curious on that. You're out there, you're meeting people. What is the reaction of people you come across as you, whether it's Tinder or whatever app you're on, as your location changes with you and you're meeting people and you're telling them what what you're doing and how do the men of whatever dating apps in those cities, how do they respond to you?
It's a mixed reaction. um, Most people think it's pretty cool, but then they kind of question my intentions. They're
Mhm.
like, "Well, what are you trying to do here?" And they don't understand. Like, typically, before in the olden days, people would be traveling, they would meet each other, and then they'd be like, "Well, oopsie daisy, we're gonna go back to wherever we go. It's hopeless. Wherever we live, it's hopeless." And these days, and I think what people don't really understand or the connection isn't fully made is I don't have to go back anywhere. I am mobile. So I can come back to the original place where I met you, or we can meet somewhere else together, and it's not hopeless. I mean, the world is small. I'm never more than like, I don't know, 2 to 9 hours away from the last place I was staying in. So it's not an impossible feat. It goes back to that person's intentions and how serious they are about kind of building a connection with me. And I think if two people are both interested in the same thing and they're willing to take an additional step to invest in getting to know one another, then it's there's no reason why it couldn't continue to grow if both parties are willing. But I think I'm finding that, maybe out of sight, out of mind, or maybe it's a little bit of the, well, Julie's off again. She's probably meeting other guys. And I don't know. I mean, I can't presume to think, but at least I'm very optimistic. I'm very hopeful because I spent 11 years in Phoenix. Not many relationships came of that. And I just think my dating pool is so much bigger now. It's not just Phoenix, it is the whole US. And I'm able to meet a lot more people, which makes me think that as long as whoever I meet is open minded, then, you know, a connection very well could be made and strengthened, and that could result in a long term relationship. So I'm hopeful.
In one of your posts, I believe you mentioned your perspective on long distance relationships, and I'm going to share mine. I think yours is very similar. Is I just don't think they should be a thing, especially these days. If you can't be together like physically, it's not gonna, you're not going to be together for a long time. Then to me, then you're a friend from afar, someone you can be in touch with as much as it works for both people. But to actually have a relationship in the way that I think most people envision it, that involves some amount of proximity and physical touch, and intimacy and sexuality, all these things that you're not going to get in a satisfying way when you're not seeing anybody for a very long time. So that's my perspective on that. So if I ever come across someone that wants a long distance relationship, it's not going to be a thing for me. But if I like them enough, or they like me enough, and one of us can adapt our lifestyle, we can
Hmm.
be together. And if not, and neither person's able to do that or willing to do that, then it's not a relationship in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I have been so overt as what you just said, but I agree, and maybe I should be more blatant about about it. Because yes, I agree, and I've been having conversations. I've had conversations with men, and they express all of these things. I'm like, okay, well, I can't take any of this seriously until we spend time together and develop some sort of plan. And if that doesn't happen, like, this is what why are we even talking? There's no future. So agree with you there.
Although I might be, if I'm more grandiose and how it like should be, than you might say. But on the other side of it, I probably through my travels, I keep in touch with, not always constantly, but at least occasionally, with people that I've met from all over the place. That's important to me to keep at least occasional contact because of what you're doing. If my version of that when it begins, I'm going to be traveling around, whether it's in this country or internationally, and having known people from these places, some men, some women, some that are just friends, some that I would be more interested in if we were in the same space. I like to keep that conversation at least existing because to me, life isn't short. I know people say life is short, and for some reasons, in a emotional way, it feels like it sometimes, for sure. But to me, it's long. I'm 38. I intend on living a very long time, and more each year, being around this country and around the world and exploring. And I like to know people when I show up to places, at least sometimes. Not all the time. Sometimes it's nice to be on my own, but it's also nice to see a familiar face occasionally. So keeping up
Hmm.
those contacts. And eventually, I think there's a pretty good chance there's someone I've met. If I'm ever going to be married, someone I've met before, that would be someone I marry, but just we haven't been in the right spot. So I don't really
Hmm.
consider them as that until we're in that same spot and really have those conversations about whether we can and want to be in the same space.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
guess along that line, when you're not in a place for very long, it's hard to really put in the time to build up that connection to be the point where you really can have the confidence that this thing could work. Do you experience
Yeah.
that as well?
Yeah, I think that's probably part of it is not enough foundation being developed or being built. And I understand that. And that's why it's like it's not a huge investment to go somewhere for a weekend, or to drive the extra like 4 hours to spend some time together. I don't know. I don't think that's that big a deal. Maybe that's just me because I do this all the time, then that I think it's not a big deal. But
I
I
don't
don't
think
know.
it, I
I
think
just feel
yeah, if you want to see someone, maybe you're not convinced you're ready to see them every day for the rest of your life. But if you think there's something there, you can explore it. And then if it goes well, explore it again until you can, both people can be in the situation. They say, yeah, this is what we want.
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
A couple more topics here I'd like to chat a bit about is you've been doing this 11 months. Do you have any sort of a soft or hard end point to when you're going to do this? Like, how will this end as you think about traveling around and staying different places? Do you have any thoughts about this is what it would take for me to stop?
I'm gonna keep going till I get sick of it.
Okay.
I think at first when as I thought about this, it was like, oh, it'll be a year-long experiment, or a year is kind of my first milestone. I'll make it a year. By 1 year, I'll have visited all 50 states. I mean, some before the nomad life, but I'm a couple states away from 50 now, and that was part of my goal. One of my goals for this. And then I would decide what I'm going to do next. And at this point, I'm like getting close to that 1 year, and I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep going. There's so many places to see. There's so many places that I want to come back to. There's so many um, places I didn't even get to touch this time around. And I think just the US is so beautiful and amazing, and there's so many sites. And I think I'm going to go international at some point as well. So it will keep going until I decide otherwise.
And with international, the people that I met that were from Portland in Mexico, they chose where they were in Mexico because it was the same time zone. And I think in one of your blog posts you mentioned that. So I'd imagine that depending on how you work and when you work, that you might go south first before you try to pull this off going in some distant time zone.
I think it would be much easier to be in a North American time zone. Um, so you're probably right there, and it's affordable. It's a little bit more affordable, so make your dollar stretch for sure.
Has there been a city that you've come across, maybe for the first time, or maybe you've been there before, that you've been tempted to stay longer, or be like, well, maybe I find someone I want to date or to be in a relationship here. This is a place that I would be more likely to stay put. Or maybe the fish in the sea that you're looking at more intently because you really like the place that you're at a given time.
Well, yes, I have kind of had those thoughts where, I could stay here for a little while longer, or I haven't really seen everything yet. But then there's the competing thought: the show must go on. You have other places on the list. You have other places booked. And, the little thing, at least when it comes to relationships, is like, well, I'm not that far away. If he wants to see me, if we want to continue developing this, we can arrange that. Um, and if not, then it's better I know now. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm on this mission. I'm trying to hit my states, my northern Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, while it's still good weather. And then once I do that, I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to maybe take a more leisurely um, time frame throughout other places that I want to return to or visit. And maybe it's 1 to 3 months instead of 1 to 5 weeks.
Okay.
So maybe in that time frame, we'll see what happens. But I also think you asked about like what is the end look like? I don't know that I will buy again. Maybe I will, but more as like an investment and not to live. But I feel like since there's no perfect place, what I might do is seasonal homes. Like, oh, I really like this for 3, 4 months, and I really like this city for 3, 4 months, and then I get all my needs met. I'm always in like the perfect weather that I want to be in,
Yep.
and I have good solid friendships in each of those cities. Which, by the way, back in Phoenix, I had best friends that I only saw like twice a year because of their own obligations. So it's not that hard to maintain friendships and things while you're doing this, or at least I'm not worried about that. And then you constantly get to make new friends.
Very cool. I think one thing that you're probably beginning to master is knowing how far in advance you need to book a place to stay. And I'm thinking more specifically about Airbnbs. How long is the longest you've stayed at one Airbnb? And to like do that and make sure you reserve one, how far in advance do you have to do it? Because if you're saying 1 to 3 months might be a thing you're doing in the future, I'd imagine these places have some random bookings. Maybe they cancel them for you. I don't know how that works, but explain how that's been.
Um, I would say it definitely depends on the length of your stay. If you're going to stay 1 month or more, you probably want to look at least a month in advance. It totally depends on seasonality, though. The summer's crazy. I would also, I'm also exploring other arrangements besides Airbnb because I have not had great experiences with Airbnb, even despite being a host for 5 years. So I'm exploring other organizations that offer sort of long term listings. It would less in, less inconsistency with quality, better loyalty and rewards for being a frequent customer, better customer service, all of these things. So to be honest, I've actually stayed at a lot of hotels fairly recently, and I'm finding a lot of perks around hotels. I'm actually going to be doing a comparison blog slash video pretty soon, hotels versus Airbnb. And then there are a lot of startups that are trying to capture this nomad space. So I'm interested in seeing what they come to the table with, and if I can endorse any of those. So if you know of any, if your audience knows of any that they want to turn me on to, let me know. Send me a DM or an email or something.
And then I look forward to you trying some of these, and then I'd imagine posting a blog, posting to your blog about it. So I'll be paying attention to Julie DeVive and looking for these things myself. A couple final topics. I would like you to give me one, maybe two of the best parts of this lifestyle, or really to the core of you, what you feel is the best part, and also like the worst or the hardest parts of traveling around the way that you are.
Yes, I'll start with kind of the hardest, and then transition that into the best. So hardest is probably one, leaving people that I've come to really care about, leaving them sometimes prematurely. And, you know, it kind of surprised me a few times where I've been on the nomad life. I've made some friends, I've gotten to know people, and it's just been fleeting, a couple weeks. And they're very affected when I leave. And me, I'm not as affected because maybe I have a shield up, or maybe, I'm this is already kind of ingrained in me that I'm on my way. And that was a little bit of a surprise, and a touching surprise. And so um I really appreciate a lot of the people that I've met, and who are even now are come back, when are you coming back, and so on. And I definitely keep in touch with them, per your earlier point, because the world is small and we will see each other again, and the people that want you in your life will stay in your life.
For sure.
So that is definitely kind of been a bittersweet part of nomad life. And I think the other, which is a flip of the coin, all the challenges that you have to deal with, all the adversity, which are is making me so resilient. When things don't go my way, when there's a fork in the road, when there's a curveball, when something is very, very frustrating, I used to perhaps, you know, get all discombobulated or upset about it, and now it's less like just another thing. And I feel really grateful for that, because I'm able to just like dodge these curveballs on such a dime, and it doesn't affect my well-being. It doesn't stress me out, because I know things will always work out, because they have. The time that my car died and it was 2 feet of snow. Well, there was a kind stranger parked next to me who started up my car. I could have freaked out and I could have had a panic attack, but things always work out. So I think that is one of the blessings, as well as, obviously in the moment it's a curse, but it's a blessing to kind of be able to grow from that, and be able to really tackle adversity to a level of resilience you never really had before. And then I think, the main beautiful thing about nomad life is every day is different. Every day is kind of like a miracle. You're seeing all of these things, just the richness, the beauty, the history, the culture, the differences. I'm very exposed to a lot of different things that, people are in their bubble and they don't get to see all of that. They don't get to learn all of that. And I'm really appreciative of all the things I've seen, and I'm constantly learning. And I think that's, a huge blessing and really cool.
One thing that you haven't mentioned yet, and I see some shadows in your background, you have a travel companion. So you're not ever really by yourself if you don't want to be. Tell me about who comes with you everywhere you go.
Yes. So Penny, she's sleeping. Penny is my 5-year-old miniature Australian Shepherd, and she is a little traveling pup herself. And yeah, the nomad life is made a little bit more difficult because of bringing a dog, but the benefit she brings is so worth it. And you're right, I'm never alone. I'm never truly alone. I always have the comfort of her presence. So
When I see you post a photo, either of yourself or with you and Penny, is there a tripod behind the camera somewhere? Is there some random stranger that takes a photo and gives you your phone back?
sometimes there's a tripod, and sometimes I'm kind of like doing this, and somebody walks by like, "Oh, do you want help? Can I help you with that?" So that happens. Or even, it's a misconception. I'm not always alone. There's always people around. You're not like I travel alone, so here I am in Starbucks all by myself. No, there's always people around. It's just, do you reach out to them? I mean, not maybe physically, but you start up a conversation and, chat up a person across the street who's looking at something, and, you know, what's over there? Where are you going? Is there anything that would be interesting to me? So I start up a lot of random conversations, and most of the time it kicks off kind of a fun, well, where are you from? What are you doing? What's up? And maybe that person will help take a photo for you.
For sure. There's always random people out there. Some are much better at taking photos than others. I've learned I
Yeah.
always try to be the best random guy photo taker. Like, I really make people work to get a good photo. Don't give me your camera and then just have a average photo. I'm trying to make it pretty good. And the thought occurred to me, maybe with you and Penny, I don't know if this is something you do, but maybe there's been a gentleman you've met somewhere in your travels that goes with you on a walk and then takes a really good photo of you, and that's a positive attribute to maybe keeping this guy around in your life. If it were
I'll, I mean, I guess it's on my checklist. Take a photo. I don't know. No,
the
that's
final topic I have for you, Julie, is my being wrong segment. It's a way to look at a past version of yourself and something the past version of yourself that was true and right in the best way, and now a more recent and current version of yourself thinks, oh, I was wrong about that. So that's what being wrong means to me. Is there a story from your life that you think might be pretty helpful to tell here before we wrap up our conversation?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I've learned in my, you know, transition from youth to adulthood is that someone else knows best. That's what's wrong. That's the truth is, I know best. First I have to ask myself, what do I want? What matters to me? Then put words to it, define it, and pursue it. And I kind of grew up being a people pleaser, or sort of following the mold, listening to, my family, my church, my culture, my society, the media, all of these things, all of these pictures, all of these messages, and thinking that's how it needs to be. That's what's right. And what I feel and what I think is not. I must be wrong and I must be broken. And really kind of tried to quiet my, my feelings and my beliefs, or I didn't even know how to identify them. And I think one of the, greatest blessings and learnings that I really appreciate over this is I've come to shut out and silence those messages that don't align with what I know to be true. And I trust myself, and I value my own voice and my own experiences, and nobody's going to tell me, your beliefs are wrong. While they can say I don't agree with your beliefs, my beliefs are mine, so they're not wrong.
I really like that. You mentioned people pleasing, and I think that becomes a big part of it. I've talked to a lot of people, I think some on the podcast, some not, about them realizing that their people pleasing behaviors of the past don't serve them well. I think to some degree, being able to be a people pleaser in certain times with people that you value a certain way, to have those skills is important. But when it overruns the way that you live your own life, I think everybody else can love the people pleaser, but does the people pleaser really love or like themselves at some of the key moments that would really define a happy and enjoyable lifestyle in life? So I think you pointing that out right away when you said that, I thought you were going in a direction of wanting to listen to other people's advice and what they say, which of course sometimes might be worthwhile, but really to the core of it, doing what you feel deep inside, and not letting other people's opinions push you away from that. So that's a very good use of the being wrong segment today, and I appreciate that, Julie.
Sure.
And
Anytime.
thank you for this conversation. One more little recap, and I'll post it with it. But where would you like people to find you most if they're interested in what you're doing and staying in touch with you or connecting with you?
So probably my primary channel, if we're talking social media, is Instagram. It is at Julie B Rose. You can find Penny at Mini Penny Rose and follow her adventures as well if you're of the very dog centric kind. And then,
Be
of
honest.
course, the website.
Who's more popular, you or her?
Well, she, I mean, she might have a higher exchange rate or engagement rate, but I think I might have more followers. So
Okay,
I don't know. But she also has dogs following her, which I don't have dogs following me. At least I don't think so.
you got to
So,
capture that.
there's some issues with the thumbs, you don't know. Um, and then the website is, if Julie DeVive is too hard, you can actually go to juliebrose.com. It'll redirect you, and hopefully that will get you where it need to go and connect you with all my other socials.
Excellent, Julie. Thank you. I'd imagine at some point I'll track you down somewhere and we'll meet up in person once again for the first time in a decade and a half. But until then, I wish you the best on your nomadic life, and I'll be watching from a distance and learning a few more things before I take off on my own journey as I best can mimic what you're doing.
Well, keep in touch and make sure you keep me posted. And this goes for you, Curt, and all your listeners. If you have any questions about what I'm doing, or you want me to do a segment on something specific, you want me to deep dive, just send me a DM or comment on something, and see what I can do. And thank you for having me.
Awesome, Julie. Thank you.
Bye.